Hi, I'm Rick Kaler. Thanks for joining me. Given that I've been a landlord since I bought my first rental house at age 19, I was really surprised to learn recently that I've never written about rent controls in 30 years of writing this column. Here's the quick primer. Rent controls are laws established by government, typically a municipality, that freeze or control the increase of rents. Now there's three types of price controls. They're rent freezes, vacancy control, and vacancy decontrol. Rent freezes are the most drastic of the three. They don't allow rents to increase at all. Vacancy controls allows a small increase in the rent when the unit becomes vacant, and the vacancy decontrol freezes rent as long as the current tenant's in the property, and then allows the landlord to raise the rent to market value when there's a vacancy. Modern rent controls were initially adopted during World War II. They've always been a state or a local measure, and they're actually banned in some 37 states. Now, why all this? Well, the Biden administration wants to change all this. The president is considering a series of executive orders that would limit rent increases on all rental properties in the U.S. financed by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. So this doesn't mean all properties, just those financed by these two very popular programs. Well, rent controls can be a really popular idea with tenants. They've seen their rents skyrocket by 17% or more since 2021. My research suggests that roughly half of the nation's housing stock is held by mom and pop landlords who own just one or two units. Now, are mom and pop just attempting to take advantage of their tenants by price gouging? I'm going to suggest no. First, inflation's up 13% since 2021. That means a proportionate increase in all the costs of owning a rental property, including repairs and maintenance. It also means that any profit the landlord receives has declined in purchasing power by 13%. So just to stay even, landlords need to raise their rents around 13%. Okay, so if they've gone up 17%, what about the other 4%? Well, many landlords lost a lot of money during the pandemic eviction moratorium. And they still could be recovering financially, but I don't think that's the biggest reason. The biggest reason may be that there's also a national housing shortage, which is putting upward pressure on rents. And of course, the shortage came largely from the supply chain disruption in the pandemic. So, do rent controls work? Yes, if you're a tenant, but only in the short term. In the longer term, rent controls hurt both landlords and tenants. In the long run, the inability of landlords to be able to raise rents gradually just erode and eventually eliminate the profit that a landlord needs to pay for necessary expenses and improvements. So typically, the first place to cut is by deferring maintenance and not doing improvements. Rental units, especially those of the typically underfunded ma and pa owners, eventually fall into disrepair with a lot of deferred maintenance. The rising costs and unprofitability of owning real estate also puts pressure on landlords to sell their properties at a discount, typically, to potential owner occupants, and then this further reduces the rental housing stock, creating further shortages. Now, in the case of the Biden proposal, like I said, there's only a portion of the nation's rentals that are going to be subject to rent controls. The shortages then of well-maintained units that come from that that subsector that will have rent controls, are then going to drive up the rents on those not subject to the freeze. It's just kind of a lose-lose. If you want to learn more, there's an article entitled, "What Does Economic Evidence Tell Us About the Effects of Rent Control?" It's published in October 2018 and is a report from the Brookings Institution that summarizes the results of the research on the topic of rent controls, and it's authored by Rebecca Diamond, who's an associate professor of economics at Stanford Graduate School of Business. That would be well worth reading. Rent controls, like so many other ideas intended to be helpful, are far more complex than they might appear. They have great appeal to a broad swath of the population that rents and tends to accept an idea on its surface, rather than critically considering the possible drawbacks or the unintended consequences, which are always there. National rent controls are much more a political feel-good measure than they are a responsible economic strategy. Thanks for joining me.